Accent the positive.
This is insane.
So you found us.
What is it trying to tell us?
No strings, no catch. You own everything.
Now stay tuned to ROCKFLUX.
The only station that matters.
You betcha.
After he's stalked, we must get rid of him immediately.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
Good morning.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale.
Your papers, please.
And away we go. Thank you, folks.
Okay.
I am so fortunate to have such a collection of excellent test specimens, subjects for this experiment in mass psychology. I know, yeah, that's an actual x-ray of my cat taken yesterday at a veterinarian who didn't die. He's upstairs. He ate some of his food this morning and he's hanging out. And the veterinarian was kind of semi-puzzled about what was ailing him. He was a little bit low in calcium and phosphorus, which is, I know we're going to get into the show. It's not going to be, this isn't a show all about pets. This is going to be actually, they're killing us all for profit. Say what? Strange things are happening all over, put it that way. So I'm going to hit the thing, which I normally don't hit this early in the morning or early in the show. And I'm just curious, foods that contain phosphorus. Let's see, out of curiosity. Chicken and turkey, pork, organ meats, seafood, dairy, nuts, and... Okay, so I just got to make sure that his wet food, he's got more of that stuff. And what did I say? The other one was calcium. That's pretty much dairy, I believe, if I'm correct. Let's see. Calcium. Highest food lists in calcium. I hope it's not one of those things we got to hit next. Whatever that. Look at the scam. Look at what a scam that is. High calcium food chart. Let's see what you got. Food. Yogurt, milk, yeah, as I thought. Sardines, collard greens. Fish, salmon, he gets salmon. 3 ounces, 18%. I mean, the highest, it seems that dairy sardines, I don't think you could feed a cat sardines. But fish, salmon, canned, which would probably be the same as that, is almost 20%. So what did we say? So we need the fish salmon deal, and what was the other one? Organ meats and seafood there too. So chicken and turkey. So that shouldn't be a problem. All right, we got that out of the way. Sorry to take you on that journey. But, anyone who's has had a pet, has a pet, is concerned. And I touched on this in the past, but I just, because this is currently something I'm dealing with, my cat's getting a little bit older, but he's only about 12. And like I say, when I was younger, and it's not my imagination, but the cat, we had cats that lived to be 18 and into their 20s. My family, and even my so-called extended family, meaning cousins and stuff, we were like a kind of a cat people like cats and dogs. We were pet people. And I just noticed this new phenomenon with the proliferation. It's 4:20 for you folks out there that is significant too. It's 4:20 a.m. in the morning on the 10th of March in the calendar year 2022. And
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And welcome aboard. And there's just one last thing I want to check before we get into the really big shoe we've got planned for you today. And that is Chernobyl disaster. Okay. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster was a nuclear accident that occurred on 26/18/86 plant near the city of, let me see here. You know, because in the news, I was starting to think that this is one of those. I guess I didn't take you along for the ride on that one, right? No. One of those Mandela effects things, because in the news they're talking about the Russians have taken over Chernobyl in Ukraine, and I'm thinking, Chernobyl, man, I thought that was like a no-go zone. But it's in Wikipedia, so is this one of those weird glitching the matrix type thing? Here they're talking about, oh no, the power goes out to this nuclear plant, blah, blah, blah. And I thought Chernobyl was like off limits and the people who lived nearby within miles. Do you see what I'm saying? There's something fishy going on there, you know. That's weird. Right? Chernobyl was like one of the worst nuclear accidents, you know, in history, you know, next to Fukushima. Or almost as bad. It's just that Fukushima was right on the shoreline and released all that radiation into the ocean. And they're like at the Chernobyl plant and it's operating and they're worried about the power lines and shutting it off and a potential problem. I'm going like, whoa, wait a second. That was, as far as I know, that's a no-go zone. You know, I mean, as early as last year, I could recall watching some documentary footage or something about that there's like pets, dogs and cats and stuff have been hanging there and animals have been going back to the area. Something fishy's going on, man. Something's not right about the world we live in. Have you noticed that? And I don't want to get off on the, you know, too far into that because I don't know. Somebody may be able to correct me into what's going on exactly with that. But man, anyway, this show.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
I got a combination. By the way, did you get your mug yet? I got a combination of Kona coffee and Colombian, and I guess we're probably getting more into the Colombian with each passing day because, like I said, I didn't mix the Kona coffee deeply into this giant can of Colombian, 100% Colombian coffee. Anyway, I made it a little bit weaker, I guess, than usual, so I decided to put in, I have some of this almond kind of milk. It's not really almond milk. It's kind of almond stuff. I'd bring it out, but it's refrigeratable. Maybe it doesn't even have to be refrigerated. I don't know. It has a long shelf life, I'll tell you that. But I put it in here, and it's almost tasteless. Like, I thought it would, like, sweeten it up or at least give it some kind of flavor. Like Edward Kissinger, you are all useless eaters. Yeah, I know. Every day it's the same old thing, man. You're goofy, guy. You're goofy.
The future. He came from the future.
Well, in the future, that's the way we are. We're all goofy. We watched Jerry Lewis, the Nutty Professor movie, the original. That old black magic's got me in its spell. Right. Yeah. Those were the days, man. Lounge music. Tony Caravan, the king of swing. And I had fun. I had fun in those days, I'll tell you. I really do. Oh, no. Yeah. So. Okay. What else do we got in show and tell? Let's get those things out of the way. Oh, we'll get into that in a second. Earthview. This, which I have to reduce a little bit, if I could do without messing up This is what yesterday looked like outside. This picture was taken through my front door. If I could get the whole thing on the screen. Let's see. You could see my porch and my Christmas lights that I keep up all year, like that country song with that chick. There's my stairs. That's all. The porch looks kind of dirty and sooty. That's because of all those cold shocks. I have to every year try to it needs I could try to power wash it, but I really probably just need to paint over it, wash it and then paint over it. But anyway, here's here's a little bit of my neighborhood. But this was yesterday. But you can see, that's not a bad looking. There's an apartment building next door. Nobody's renting that entire place. There's 4 units in there. The woman who has it is kind of, she's into references, and I guess she can't find people with decent references. And you can see off on the street behind there's some of those big old houses. And they must cost a lot to heat. There used to be, you see the tallest house in the distance towards the right, not the yellow house, that's in the front. That's a nice looking house too. Some older gentleman lives in there. But next to that, towards the back, with those big trees behind it, this is really a nice winter, image when you think about it. There used to be a house exactly like that, where you see that yellow pole sticking up in between my two the telephone pole and the pole from my porch, the White House here. There used to be that exact architecturally designed house, a big one right there in that spot. They wrecked that I guess 2 years ago or a year or so ago, and it's just turned it into a lawn. That house at one point was selling for $5,000, not the one you see, but the one they tore down. It sold for $5,000. You imagine that? And this couple went in there, and it's and they just didn't know what they were in over their heads. And if I would have known it, I really was going to take it. I was going to sell my house. I was going to buy that house, I mean, do you understand what a mortgage on a $5,000 house would be? I mean, well, just whatever. The taxes here are really ridiculously low too. But I mean, you could almost buy it for cash. I mean, you wouldn't. It would be $100 some a month. Your basic payments. I mean, then you'd have to deal with sewer and that other stuff. But I would have just bought it if I would have known that this couple was just going to go in there, do nothing, and just let it deteriorate for a year or so, and then till it got to the point where it was condemned. All they had to do was some patching, fixing, and a little bit of painting and stuff, and they could have over the years, it would have been one of those. Not that I want to push the movie, but like Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. Remember, they took that old house and then they turned it into a nice place, and at the end of the movie, when the kid heard the bell, Daddy, I heard when a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. It's the frog, say. Wait a second. I thought you said Jimmy Stewart, not Edward G. Robinson. It's a frog, say. The frog's taking over now. Now I might sound like a Batman, some kind of guy. Or on that show, with those, what was that Cartoon Network show? One of the guys, the guy who was the butterfly guy. Remember him? He had a voice like this. You didn't know that I was a voice guy. That's right, sweetheart. Ask me any question, ask me any voice, I do them all. I do everything. I was the king of everything, really. King of swing. Here he is. I don't have the intro to my old show, but it used to be that. Mr. Everything. Look at me now. And as I look at myself through the monitor, look at you. Look at you. Cats and dogs are dying young now. Man, it's pathetic. I hope this doesn't upset people, this image being up there. I won't keep it up for the whole show. But that's the actual inside of a cat. Yet from an x-ray yesterday. And his innards those innards supposedly looked good according to the vet. He was just a little bit low in phosphorus and calcium. But otherwise she's, gave him a fairly clean bill of health and said, put this stuff in between his things just for the sake of it. He didn't seem to have any worms or anything like that. But he hadn't been eating as much or going to the, using the litter box as much as he should. But he does seem to have an appetite. He just likes his food to be super wet, and you give him canned food and you can even add water to it to moisten it up. And stir it up and put it on. I put them on little paper plates because he just keeps, destroys the thing. But he somehow licks wet food dry almost. And it's just this dry thing on his thing. So that's why I put it on these paper things, because otherwise I'd be having to get some scouring pad. And sometimes I'll add a little water to it and kind of put it in a little mound before, to give him one more try, and he'll lick that down to the bottom, and then I just throw the thing away. So I guess I'm on a can a day of that and giving him the moister stuff in his other bowl. And I just have to keep an eye out. I mean, I think today I gave him beef and liver or something. So that's organ meat, which should give him, I think that was under phosphorus. So that should boost his phosphorus today, I would guess. And I have been giving him salmon, but I have some canned salmon in there, so I'll make sure he gets some salmon. And that should take care of his calcium. And they'll just keep, put a little bit of extra of that in as the priority over the next couple of weeks or the week or two, and then just get him into an just mix up, give him a mix. A variety, right? Who says that? That's sounds like a...
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
All right. I'm going to take this off because this might bother some people. The cats and dogs are dying young. But it's the truth, and, it's really a tragedy. And we all become attached to our animals, and, they're our friends. And it really is c'est tragique. I talked about this yesterday, and I just wanted to, I realize I still have it. And this is the CIA sanitized copy of this Chan Thomas report from back in the 60s or something like that. All right. This was released in 2013, approved by the CIA. So, and I've read this once before, but I'm going to read it again, and because we talked about it yesterday, and I'm just going to go through some of the key, the broad strokes. So with a rumble so low as to be inaudible, growing and throbbing, fuming, thundering, earthquake starts. It's an earthquake like no other recorded in history, all right? The mighty Pacific rears back, piles up into a mountain of water more than 2 miles high, and then races eastward. All right, with the forces of 1,000 armies, the Pacific water follows the wind eastward, burying Los Angeles and San Francisco as if they were grains of sand. Nothing stops it, and there's overwhelming onslaught of wind and ocean. Right? And so across the continent, 1,000-mile-per-hour winds wreaks its unholy vengeance everywhere. And then what it's saying here is within 3 hours, the fantastic wall of water moves across the continent. That's the U.S., but Canada too, and Mexico, all right, Central America. Within 3 hours, the water moves across the continent, burying the wind-ravaged land under 2 miles of seething water coast to coast. In a fraction of a day, 1 day, all vestiges of civilization are gone, and the great cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, New York, are nothing but legends. Barely a stone is left where millions walked just a few hours before. Now, why would the CIA classify this for 50 frickin' years? You understand, man. I mean, this is, what did she say?
This is insane.
Yeah. I mean, and...
This is a nightmare. It must be a nightmare.
No, it is not. I've been having weird dreams. But they're not like weird dreams or nightmares or anything like that. But just dreams of like different places, different people, or weird stuff. Like, I mean, it's good that I'm dreaming. I mean, I have been eating this ridiculously crazy diet, like healthy diet, to try to fight off this thing. Though yesterday was stressful because of that cat thing and, being at the vet and all that. And stuff, and I'm still, hoping the best, because I don't know. I mean, like I said, despite the fact that there's been this proliferation, the ubiquitousness of veterinarians, and nothing against veterinarians, because I know they care about animals, and that's why most of them get into it. But it just seems that with all these prescriptions, all this veterinarian care, and all this like custom, food, so-called healthy foods, for cats and dogs, that the death rate for, household animals has dropped dramatically, like almost been cut in half, but definitely cut. Like a third of their lives have been shaved off. And if you're old enough to know what people used before the age of the veterinarian, when there was like one veterinarian, he was the same guy who was out working, the farmers would call him in when there was, a complication with the cow, giving birth, or, a horse had a problem. A true veterinarian, an animal doctor. And so you would go to, in a real serious situation, you would see a veterinarian, and there was like one in the county type of thing, But now they're everywhere. And they've got clinics, and they've got labs, and they've got the whole 9 yards. But it's this food, this pet food. It's like, it's almost a whole aisle of pet food, right? And there's commercials, and there's all these kinds, like without naming brands, but they're all like, everybody's got something, and watch for the first ingredient. That's the most important, avoid rice. And the thing is, what I'm saying is before the there was a veterinarian or 10 in every town. And before all these fancy things, you had these like a can of dog food, a big bag of kibble, a can of cat food. It's that classic thing, like Steve Martin in that movie when he was like Cyrano Devore, had the big nose. Remember that movie? And there was a cat in a tree, and to get the cat in the tree, he got the can opener, and he just did the turn the can opener thing, and the cat came down the tree, right? Because you used to get these cans of cat food, and you would just plop it out. And when you didn't have cat food or in between, you'd give it leftovers. And you didn't even think, like I've said before on this show, my mother, I could remember her throwing like leftover spaghetti in his bowl, and the cat just ate it up and lived to be 23 or something. And you got to wonder about us. People talk about GMO foods and all that kind of crazy stuff. But it's beyond that, which is no doubt part of it. But it's, maybe it's this over, we're just not eating. I mean, definitely, the junk food thing is a factor. All right. GMO is a factor. But I think what it really boils down to is just good old family meals, home cooking, and, the basics that were keeping us alive. Because I cannot stand, and I've even seen doctors on TV type of thing or YouTube say how people didn't live longer years ago and stuff like that. And I'm going, well, first of all, many, many years ago, the reason that they would say the average life expectancy was only 30 or 40 years old, because they were like, first of all, there was hardly any people on the planet, okay? We didn't have billions, we had millions, right? Number one, we're going back thousands of years. And they were constantly warring each other. It's like the Romans. The life expectancy of a gladiator, Roman soldier and stuff. I mean, these people were at wars. You've seen these movies. You've read history. I mean, the history of human kind is war. So it should come as no surprise that there's a war going on now, and we just got out of like 20 years of endless wars, right? I mean, it's like that's the issue that people should be focusing on. Okay, so people died young years ago because there was war. And the same thing happened in World War I and World War II and in, Korea and Vietnam, especially even Vietnam and, most recently big war, but then, the Gulf Wars, Middle Eastern wars. That, you send 18 to, people who are basically young men to war and, and they get killed. And so that brings the whole, that distorts the median age, life span drastically. Because if you limit the low end, then you see what I mean? You don't have anything pulling the age, anyway. So, be that as it may. And now we have, even though the fact we have people living longer into their 90s in these, warehoused nursing homes and managed care facilities, the fact of the matter is the life expectancy of Americans has dropped 2 years, like back in 2019, 2020. And those aren't numbers because of that plague, because 99.9% plus of the people in America did not die from it. A statistics the media to this day just doesn't want to talk about. 99.9% plus, or 99% plus, not 99, depends on the age group. That would be of like people, kids. But of older people, it's 99% plus. Like, I don't know, 99%, 99.3, 99.6. I mean, these are seriously big numbers. If I told you had a 99% chance of not getting harmed if you go, hiking on that trail, you'll go, okay, well, those are pretty good odds. I'll just keep my eye out and I'll be cautious, right? Think about that. But if I told you, well, you had 50-50 chances of coming back, you'd go, I don't know if I want to do that. And so only the daredevil would do that. You see? So we're kind of whacked out. It's, it really is. It's wackadoodle land. We're in some strange things are happening. I put in the chat. Really weird. Right? And that's kind of the theme of the show, the cat thing. I have been talking about it, and now that has come. I share stuff here. I mean, after all.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I mean, it is my morning vlog, and there's nobody listening to it live, and here we are, and this is my studio, front room, and you've got camera 2 up there looking out, and soon we'll be watching the coal trucks come. It's not bad. It's just not as good as it was yesterday. I don't know. Something about the coffee the past 2 days was just like a lot better. So I don't know. Maybe I need to get another packet of that Kona coffee. Maybe it is the Kona coffee that really is good. I mean, they say it's the best. You see that AM radio back there. You can see the dial just to the left of my Codex book, which is about, the hard problem of consciousness, and my first attempt at the free flow of consciousness. And then, of course, later on there was my last book from last year, Then What? Don't know if I'm going to put out a book this year or not. Don't know. Haven't decided yet. Not exactly sure. We'll have to see how my life goes. If I do, it will be free flow of consciousness again. And let me tell you, that's not so easy to... Like, some people might think that's like a cop-out or something. No, it's hard. It's a lot easier to write. I'm as a writer, I write, and I obviously write these beat poetry songs, so I'm a poet, and I know it. And I could really, I could think, I could be given a topic or think of a topic, and I could write an essay, and I could go over it a couple of times and, and perfect it. And it's less likely to have, like, subtle errors and stuff. When my books were collections of essays, short stories, screenplays, and things like that, there were a lot less, like, little goofy errors that, But in a free flow of consciousness, you're just writing. So it's like, you're just pulling stuff and you're going and you have to go with the flow, but sometimes the flow isn't there. But you want it to have some kind of flow. So it's not as easy as you think. It's actually, I think in some ways, the Flow of Consciousness book is actually harder than the straight ahead, book. I've written 10 books, 11 technically. But it's, I think I found that these last 2 books were a bit harder. And the parts of them that were easier is usually like the opening, where I've actually have some essay-like beginning, based on certain concept, like Codex, which opens up dealing with the hard problem of consciousness and goes through that in kind of an essayish form, and then then just kind of evolves into this like flow of things. But the Then What book is pretty interesting because it's chock full of images. And it's a pity it's in black and white, but I did that intentional because I wanted to sell it for $9.95. I wanted to have the book affordable to people. I mean, you could get a Kindle or an Apple Books version of it, for a couple of bucks. But the problem with that is that book was made for print. A book is made for print. I mean, I'm of that era. So yes, I've made my books available in those formats, the digital formats, but they don't convert right. And it's really weird. And I've said this before. I actually literally used Apple software to prepare it for Apple Books and uploaded it through that software. In other words, go to File, export to Apple Books. I mean, literally you did it the way, But when the Apple Book version just wasn't as, as booky, And Kindle, man, I don't know about Kindle. I mean, Kindle messes up. And I just want to throw this one last thing in. I mean, I know I'm all over the place, but this is a Flow of Consciousness show too. There's this thing called PDF, which everybody knows about, and it's been around for the longest time, and of course Adobe, I guess, owns the owns it now or somehow, Adobe Acrobat Reader. But the PDF format, whoever owns it or whatever, it seems to be universal and it's used all over the place. The PDF format basically preserves the document, its images and its fonts in its original form, as long as it's saved properly, So why does Kindle, and you can read a PDF on Kindle and like the Apple books, like if you have the Apple app, like reader thing, it allows you to do it. But instead they want this ebook, EPUB, and this other thing, so that people could change the flow or do something. But the thing is, with a PDF file, you can enlarge the fonts, and in Acrobat Reader and stuff like that, you can highlight things, and I mean, you could even cut and paste text and stuff. So I really don't understand, and it annoys me, and I'm thinking about, I've always thought about it, and I may do it sometime. I mean, if I had more viewers here. Though I did notice that, on like, I've put my videos individually on some other areas. So, for example, when I did my first video on Ukraine, and I put that on my podcasting, up for podcasting, on a separate site, it got about, I don't know, a dozen or so views there. I mean, they weren't coming from YouTube. And yesterday I just randomly was paging through some things on Rumble, because I have the actual copies of videos on Rumble. And that same video there, for some reason, because it was a Ukraine thing, map was on it or something, so I guess it was topical, so people were interested. That had something like 36 views. And then here, I'm not sure what it got on this particular platform, but I think it did fairly well. Let me just check out of curiosity here. New window, YouTube. We'll take you along for the ride. Let's just see what's going on right now. I was over at Nerve Gorilla. This guy, he's a lunatic, man. He's doing that Phil Henry show. And I see they're listing me. Lingerie football match, Australia. Crazy. I like chicks with like really wild, weird hair, But you can see this nonsense. But anyway, let's go to my videos. And in case you haven't done this, this is what I was trying to say the other day. And this may be hard to see if you're looking at a small screen. But when you first go to my videos, most of these videos, you're going to see a lot of garden videos. All right? And then, but see, I do live videos, and after they're done live, they're automatically put up here. All right? So I'm going to go to the Ukraine. Yeah, there's a dozen there. All right, so what I'm trying to get at here is that if you take, I mean, for me, this is a lot. If you take a dozen on, I don't know, 36 on Rumble, a dozen on maybe 3Speak or something like that, a dozen on YouTube, you're talking what, 48, 60. You see what I mean? Some of these videos, by me scattering them on other platforms, and it's also available on Podcast Index. So some people listen to this as a podcast only, right? So, actually my videos are, my audience has gotten bigger. It's just not, the YouTube audience is small. And I've been noticing this with a lot. Like I was talking about that Unify movement where they were trying, there's a bunch of people who are trying to just meditate, pray, get together for peace and harmony and stuff, which is, totally lacking in this world. because today's world, like I say, love is a 4-letter word in a negative sense to most people. They're just afraid to express goodness. They want to, they're armchair generals, right? It doesn't matter like who started a thing. The point is everyone should be on the side of ending it. You see what I'm saying? Do you understand that? End it. We don't have to win. Doesn't matter that, the person that started it is right or wrong. In most cases, a person who starts some kind of fight, some war or whatever it is wrong. And we've certainly done that ourselves many a time, right? I mean, we went into Iraq. I don't even want to get into it. We had no right going over there. It was a sovereign country, and they didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and they had nothing to do with 9/11. But we occupied, and upwards of 600,000 Iraqis were killed. That's pretty crazy, I mean, subsequently with terrorism and all that stuff, one could argue that soldiers would argue, patriots, that we were fighting the good fight, but it's like the Crusades or something. The point of the matter is there comes a time where we have to, as a species, rise above the idea that we have to kill the other person off. And we also have to be cognizant of the idea that sometimes some people tend to put a stick in a hornet's nest or push somebody back against the wall. It's like you do not mess with certain people because certain people, have an inability of turning the cheek or walking or just walking away or, whatever. It's like our society, but it's our society today. I mean, the word triggered did not exist when I grew up. You see what I mean? The word triggered, when someone says that triggered, somebody was triggered by this or this thing, that triggers people. The only type of people who were triggered by something were someone who had a mental illness. You see what I mean? Who had really were mentally ill, mentally disturbed. Because the average person had, you used to have a report card and there would be things like health habits, self-control, these kinds of things. So that's why I say, it gets into like the government telling you, wash your hands. Well, when I went to school, man, you had a thing called health habits. By the time you got out of like the 4th or 5th grade, you pretty much learned it one way or if your parents weren't teaching it to you, the school were flunking you in it, and you learned to wash yourself and stay clean, right? Health habits was called. You got graded on it in grade school. And the same went with, the same went with self-control. And I forget the whole thing. I wish I at one point I had an old report card I had found at one point, but that's long since gone. I was in a box somewhere, got destroyed or flooded out somewhere. But so, we have this Peter Pan generation and or culture, I should say. And so people just don't have any self-control. They don't have any I don't know what I'm searching for the word, the idea of just being able to take it, what's the word I'm searching for? It's 4:59 a.m. in the morning. It's Thursday, March 10th, 2022, and yes.
This is insane.
Thick skin, even. You know what I mean? Just the idea. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. So yeah, the idea of triggered came along as like a 21st century. It's not even in the beginning of the 21st century. It's like the second decade of the 21st century. Somehow people started to become triggered. That's a mental illness. That needs to be treated. If your child is triggered, they need to see a shrink. And if the shrink is like accepting that as some kind of thing, that shrink should lose their license. All right? Being triggered? I mean, even the name triggered, triggered, as in the trigger of a gun, and that's it. And that's why, that's why we go to war. So we're not getting any better as a civilization. It's like we've gotten worse because people are triggered, and now they get triggered and they go to war. And then instead of people speaking out towards peace and diplomacy and like rationality and common sense and like, hey, calm down, they're saying, we got to send over MiGs and we got to send over more weapons and donate to this. Right? And it's okay to spend, $5, $6 a gallon of gas for freedom. It's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Why doesn't the president of the United States, who was elected, who we pay $400,000 a year, and congressmen who we pay all this money to, right? And women, and who become multimillionaires, and all those bureaucrats in Washington that are making six figures, right? Why don't they do their job and just end this thing peacefully and negotiate? It's pretty clear what's going on and how this thing can end. It's already laid out. I mean, there's not even there doesn't even need to be negotiations at this point, right? Look at this truck right in front of my house. This happens every now and then. I don't know why this guy does this. It's just that it must be an open spot on the street. And that damn thing, and he's going to like change his oil or put some extra oil in, and he like might leave like the oil, the plastic oil container or something, or brake fluid container or something. He'll leave it right on the street or right on my sidewalk. Or he's decided to sleep there. Take a nap in front of my house. Isn't that weird? I've seen it happen before, like once a month or so. It's probably the same guy, right? Because he's found hits this spot. See, because the block I'm on, like I said, I chose this. One of the reasons I purchased this property is because there's a doctor's office next door. Across the street's a hardware. And I showed you earlier on my, was it the featured image? No, it was the Earth View. You see, it's a nice, it's an open area. So it's a lot, it looks like it's a decent neighborhood-ish area. Though it's it would be considered, if you would go back like 6 or 7 blocks, it would be considered a rough side of town. It looks almost, when you see that thing up there, that the guy might be able to see me through the, his window. But the camera that's looking at him is actually up under, viewing up at him. It is kind of freaky, though. Get away from my house. Or he's somehow stealing my internet. I've often got on my Wi-Fi, like I have to watch my connection to make sure it doesn't go down. Because sometimes I get this thing. I have this very complex password. All right. I mean, really complex, It's like one of these, it's almost like a Bitcoin type of, complex password. Because it's a royal pain, because every time I've hooked up a new device or something, because I've gotten some of these home, because I have these Echo Dots, right? And so, of course, it could be like a CIA, NSA thing in that truck. And they're in the back of the truck, these guys with like monitors, they're tying into this camera, listening in, trying to figure out what's going on. They're here, they're set up their little thing. And I guess, and shortly they'll be like coming through, breaking down the door Don't laugh. It happens. That's how they do this stuff. 5:05 a.m. and I'll have to turn on the X-ray camera so I can look inside the back of that truck. But it says weak, like, as if my, there's a vulnerability to my Wi-Fi. And having hooked up these extra devices so I could have my Echo device turn on lights and do different things, every time I've had to do that, I go through this thing and I'm going, come on, man, this is not weak password. So I don't know, what is it? And that's another thing. Tell me. Where's the weakness? Is it within the ISP? Is it in the box they gave? Is it in the modem that came from the ISP? Because it's not on my end. It's not in my router, And in fact, right now I don't even broadcast this show. I don't use Wi-Fi. I'm hardwired into the modem coming from the ISP. That's just how I do it. I've always put my computers, even though it's been a royal pain, because I've got to run a wire, sometimes a fairly long distance. And even upstairs into my bedroom, I go through the ceiling where my modem is, and I'm running an Ethernet line direct into my upstairs where I do have Wi-Fi, but my set-top box on my TV that I watch YouTube and movies and stuff on is hardwired. So how could that be vulnerable? I'm literally hardwired. So it goes. So when I get that, and I've seen that several times, and so yeah, it could well possibly be that there's a weakness in this system, but the weak link is the ISP. And these people try charging you over $100 a month just for internet. There was a time when you paid over $100 a month, you got TV, phone, and internet for that price. And now I just get internet, and and it's not the greatest, from time to time. So you talk about inflation. That's just another example. The cost of internet, right? See? So who knows what that guy was doing? So did he, am I going to go out there today and see this like plastic container of brake fluid or some kind of fluid? Let's see if we could see anything on the side of the truck. No, it's too dark. Yeah. Well, maybe it was. So maybe, maybe we were talking about them and they were figuring it out. I mean, because that was too long for a nap, or too short for a nap. But he could have been, checking his email, I guess. And the coffee's just not as hot. That's another thing. And it's going faster. Again. It's really weird, right? Really weird. I don't know. Can't figure it out.
Hey, it's me. How you doing, man?
I don't know. Some weird truck just pulled up, but it left. And I'm just sitting here. The show was, the cat seems, the vet, took blood tests, x-rays, did the official examination and all that stuff, and said she was befuddled, perhaps. But the same thing with humans. It's like, when you go to the emergency, not you, but I have. Like, I've gone to the emergency room a couple of times where things were like really, I'm not like a hypochondriac at all. It's like right now. I mean, I'm going against doctor's orders. They wanted to take out my gallbladder, months ago. And I'm fighting it. I'm doing diet and trying homeopathic way. So I'm not a hypochondriac, right? Like when I tell you I had cancer, I mean, that's not hypochondriac. I had cancer and I had to have a radical prostatectomy. You know what I mean? I had this kidney operations, plural, because that was, they insisted, and they said this could have, something could have gotten lodged and I could have, lost a kidney. So I don't take, it's like I'm not a hypochondriac, and I usually, for the most part, I just try to eat healthy, live healthy, and do the best I can. I don't want to go to a hospital. Who the heck wants to go to a hospital? I don't even like going to the doctor. Right? So, but I've had to go a couple times, and, this may sound scary because I've had my share of things, weird things. Like one time I woke up and I was like extremely like dizzy. And everyone said, "Oh, that's vertigo. I've gotten that," or "I heard people get that." And like, "Oh." But I went to the hospital and it wasn't vertigo. They said, "No, it's not vertigo." But then they run these, but then they took like a CT scan of my head. Irradiated my head. That's like guaranteed, like future brain tumor, crap. It's like what they did with the cat. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, let's take an x-ray. Let's irradiate that poor little thing. Now, I understand in some cases, but I mean, they're just too free with the x-rays. Now, the blood test thing, that's a different story. But yeah, they take your blood test. But it's like x-rays, blood tests, whatever, and then they say, then he gave me a few pills and sent me back, and they didn't really know what was wrong with me. It just so happened I had a scheduled normal checkup appointment with my regular doctor, and she said she thought that was, from her standpoint, she said, it's very rare, but actually, this is the thing, like I'm telling you about, strange things are happening. Right. And, the animals, and this falls right in line with the animals dying young and people. And we're U.S. Life expectancy dropping by like 2 years just in the past couple of years. She said, well, I think what you have is there's some kind of crystals, in your ear, behind your ear or something weird like that, crystal type things, and they get dislodged or moved around or something weird like that. She goes, it's very rare, but that's what that is. But she said, oddly enough, I've had a number of cases of that this year. And that part, was the one that was the mind blower. And she said, well, you seem to be doing okay now, because normally what I would do is there's actually physical therapy that people do where they have to lean over like a certain way. It's almost like a yoga type of thing they would have to do in order to somehow get everything back in aligned or something. But it wasn't vertigo. Like everybody I talked to, "Oh, you got vertigo." It's like, no, I don't have vertigo. You don't understand. But I literally had to crawl down because I live my bedroom's on the second floor. And I have steps going down to the sidewalk, as you could see in that picture, wherever it is. Let's look at that earth view again. It's a beautiful neighborhood, isn't it? You see, there's a porch, and see, I have stairs going down to the street. But like I say, considering this house, my mortgage, taxes, and insurance are $200. Do you understand? So this is like how you could live if you're smart. $200. You can't get rent like that. You can't get rent with a roommate for that. And that's my mortgage, taxes, and insurance. I own this house. It's like half paid off already. Right? But anyway, I had to crawl down the stairs and wait for an ambulance to pick me up. I was like, what the? And I go to the emergency room, and what do? They resort to the two things. It's either an X-ray or CT scan. CT scan is an X-ray times who knows what, and shooting your brain with that, man. Oh, God. Right? And, and then, of course, but they gave me some pills for it, dizziness pills. And one other time I woke up and it happened. It was like it was happening. Wasn't as bad. And I took one of those pills and I was fine that day. So I still have those pills, I guess, if it ever happens again. But I think I might have aligned it. It might be aligned because I don't seem to. That's been a while. Of course, knock on wood. Whenever you say something like that, then the next thing you know, it happens again. Okay, so that was this past summer. And then there was then the gallbladder thing occurred. But that was a mystery. That was like having the worst heartburn in the world times 10. You see what I'm saying? And they say that, a gallstone can be like giving birth. And the reason they use that analogy is because most women, more women get gallstones than men. And they give that analogy, and they said the pain can be just like giving birth. And the estrogen is a thing with women who are pregnant do tend to form gallstones. But men, the other way of getting gallstones is if you've lost a lot of weight, fairly quickly, and I guess there's certain dietary things. There's some other thing. And the fact of the matter was those other factors, rare factors, were my, applied to me, put it that way. Because like I had said before in previous shows, and, I'm talking about this stuff. So I guess I really need to straighten this out for you.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
We'll get into some other stuff. I just want to get through this. When I used to be like the coder and doing my publications and had like the thing with all the computers in front of me, kind of like what I have now, but I mean, I was doing it all day, like for 12 to 16 hours a day. I put on a lot of weight. And then eventually when I got out of that scene, I took off a lot of weight fairly quickly. And that could cause gallstones. So that's probably what happened. But anyway, I woke up, I didn't wake up. I couldn't go to sleep. So it was like, if you've ever had heartburn, and I don't wish that on you, but everyone, I think, sooner or later gets heartburn sometimes, like bad heartburn, where you can't get comfortable, you're sitting up, you're thinking, oh my God, this is horrible. But you're trying to persevere through it. You take that there's a couple of over-the-counter type of things you can take, and one of them works in about a half hour. But I think that one has been linked to some kind of I don't know what, but something bad. There was, when I still had TV, they were advertising. There was a lawsuit against it, and I had taken that once or twice. It caused cancer or something. Which was probably, when I had taken it, it probably led to my, and things like Tums and stuff like that, they're not good for your kidneys and liver and stuff either. It's just like aspirin now. Have you seen the latest stuff on aspirin? And again, I'm not a medical professional giving you medical advice. I'm just saying, look into that kind of stuff. There's a new paper in one of the journals written out saying, in other words, the risk factors for people. You have to, you really have to find a doctor that's knowledgeable and try to take the time. Like I always say, go there with an index card, even in your pocket or purse, whatever you have, and make a list of things so you don't forget, and ask your doctor these specific questions that have come along. Like keep an ongoing note, of things that might have occurred in between your annual checkup or whatever it is. And when you get there, because it's McMedicine and you only have 10 or 15 minutes and then they walk out, it's, have that list and go and just start asking, all those questions so you don't forget. But yeah, this heartburn deal is it's like heartburn times, I would say 10. I mean, it's like, like I said, they compare it for women that it's like childbirth. And, I can't imagine what childbirth would be like. But, I've seen enough women, describe it and go through it. And it's like, yeah, that's not fun. All right. So that was ambulance, and I was wreathing in pain. And, they don't want to do anything for you because they want to know what it is. So they won't give you any pain relief. See, that's the really weird part. And so you're in this thing, you're there, they're loading you in and blah, blah. They put, maybe they'll give you a saline solution. It's the first thing you do is they throw an IV in, and it's just basically just a saline solution, right? But so they have that IV so they could inject something in you if they have to or whatever. You're set in case you got to go into the OR or something. And they ask you a million questions, blah, 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 take your blood and all that stuff. And that time, they did not tell me I had gallstones, and they gave me pills for nausea, vomit, like extreme pain. Because what happened was, apparently, I guess I had passed one of the stones. And that pain was this stone going through this bile duct. Right? So that the CT, and I'm trying to think if that was post the CT scan I had of my abdomen that showed that I had gallstones, which I'm kind of hoping it was, because that would mean one less. Now, since then, I have been taking this like chunk of Piedra, which is supposed to break up some of this stuff or whatever, or help kind of for gallbladder and liver health. But I've been on a strict diet of trying to do the homeopathic thing. So I'm just trying to tell you, it's all messed up, man. It's just enough with that. Okay. It's, it's crazy, it's like,
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
It's just wacky. So our health is not being focused on, and as I've been stressing and repeating the past several shows, 40,000 people a week on average die in this country from treatable, there goes the coal trucks, treatable, preventable, and in some cases even curable diseases. 40,000 people a week, and 2,000 people are literally murdered in this country on average each week. Those are government statistics. All right? Averaged out. Annual death rates, right? Homicide rates and death from various diseases. And these diseases are things that are like, kidney diseases and type 2 diabetes and, and heart-related diseases and stuff. Of course, there's cancers thrown in there, too. I mean, the leading cause of death in this country is heart disease. It's like 650,000 people a year or more. And that's dietary predominantly. I mean, there are certain people with genetic dispositions for certain diseases. There's no doubt about that. But the idea is have you looked, when you're like me and you look at the box of cereal or the foods and you see the stuff that's in it. My nose is itchy or something. My mustache. You know, the mustache. How about the soul patch? Man of 1,000 voices. So, health. And so we've got a war going on there because people are triggered. We triggered some guy, and nobody's looking at what triggered that person There's no justification for being triggered. Even the people here in this country, there's no justification for being triggered. You know, poor you. All right? Oh, somebody called me a name. Oh, there's a statue. That's triggering me. You need to see a psychiatrist. If you're like looking at statues and that's like triggering you and that's causing a problem, you got a mental problem. An illness, and I'm not making light of mental illness, but I mean, if you're looking at a statue that's been there in some town square, and that is causing some kind of like causing you to like get like anxious, crazy, angry, you know, upset, triggered, you got a problem, all right? Because for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades, it didn't trigger anybody else. It's just a historical monument. Or a name. Man, when I went to school, kids are so cruel. And I'm sure kids are still that way. Of course, now they probably like, you know, lock them away in prison or something. Who knows what they do to poor kids today. But I mean, kids said the most horrible things to one another. Name calling and stuff. And you always had bullies and stuff like that. But you got through it, you know. And your parents would tell you that, you know. It's like, well, don't worry about that, or avoid that person, or don't do that. You know, it's like, you know, fighting, and then when people were in fighting, then that was, you were disciplined for fighting, and the whole idea was that's what was supposed to be a lesson in life. You don't solve your problems through violence and fighting. But see, you know, this whole idea of triggering and rioting, you know, looting, you know, and all these ridiculous protests and stuff. And then this media trying to make money on it by just like pushing out these lies and dividing people. So, you know, from that aspect alone, you know, this whole thing is over, right? It's game over. You see? Because you can't go back once you have two generations that are basically like mentally, literally programmed, right, with these kinds of problems. You know, you would have to deprogram them, and that's not going to happen. And deprogramming is not an easy task. And I don't even think it's a moral task. You know, it's like ethical. I don't think that we have the right to, you know, decide, you know, make those kinds of decisions. What I'm saying is I'm looking and criticizing the state of things in general. No one really has the moral authority to change a person's, you know, thought process, turn them, you know, reprogram them. But that's what the school system did over the past, say, 30 years. They literally indoctrinated, conditioned people, and the media now is propagandizing them. So you have that going on, which spells the end of Western civilization, period. Okay? Forget about hyperinflation. Forget about this ridiculousness of wars. Forget about the ridiculousness of like oil and energy and the idiocy of these people not understanding, saying we got to go electric and green and electric cars, but they don't know where electricity comes from. They want to like eliminate the source of electricity. It's even like buying oil from Venezuela dictators and stuff. The problem with that is electric cars run mostly on natural gas. And like I say, in certain areas up here in the northern region, the upper part of the United States, the upper third, so to speak, a lot of electric cars have coal generation plants so that electricity, heat, and everything comes from coal, not directly, but indirectly. So your Tesla car is running on natural gas and coal, especially in this area. You go to a Tesla charging station, you're plugging in, and charging electricity, but that electricity is not coming from some windmill. It's not coming from some dam. We don't have any great rivers around, these parts in the mid-Atlantic like that. Hydroelectric power, right? There's no giant solar farms, around these parts. There's a lot of wind turbines, but half of them don't even work anymore. They've been up too long. People don't understand. And like I say, there's no chain of custody for those things because they've been traded on the open market. It was a scam from day one. It was a tax. Companies got like a tax rebate. The utilities got $1 million tax rebate. I think it cost $3 million for some of these things. $3 million, imagine that, per windmill. And they got like $1 million cash, $1 million tax rebate, and then there was some $1 million that was somehow borrowed or went through the Wall Street system, the financial network, and exotic trades and things like that. And then they passed through ownership of these things so that, they were put on various books so people could take advantage, probably took advantage of that $1 million tax rebate. 3 or 4 different entities, deducted $1 million. And then it gets into this like financial void that they put it in. They bundle these things up. And then suddenly it's like, we lose the chain of custody of like who even owns this specific thing. And meanwhile, power rates go up, but these things start to decay, right? Because they have a limited life expectancy. And it takes heavy equipment. I mean, these things are big. You see them from a distance driving. They've ruined all the views, killed all the birds. But you see them from a distance, and they kind of look big, but you have no idea unless you stand at the bottom of one or see a guy standing on the top of one to understand how huge these things are. So they require these massive cranes that run on what? Fossil fuels. Fossil fuels. And so you can't even repair them without fossil fuels. And, there have been studies done on the amount of energy, like the plastics, or to forge, the metal pieces are forged, the steel, forged steel, electroplated forged steel, hardened plastics. Where do you think plastics are? It's an oil product, right? It's a byproduct of a barrel of oil, right? Less than half of a barrel of oil is gasoline. You know what I mean? Plastics. So they want to wean us away from what they call fossil fuels, from oil, and they don't understand. Yeah, but everything, just look around your house. Unless your house is like, I don't know, cinder blocks with mortar and no glass, melt, because even windows and stuff are like, to understand, bricks are heated in these ovens and kilns and stuff. I mean, anything forged steel, plastic molds, and all this stuff, that plastics and stuff, all these devices, everything we have, it comes from we are a carbon-based civilization, and actually we're a carbon-based life form. And to think that 0.004 CO2, right, when 99.9% of the Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen, oxygen, and argon, and that 0.004 CO2 is only a trace gas, but we're still a carbon-based life form. It still feeds the trees, gives us crops, and in turn we get oxygen and food from it. And everything around us is somehow, from your remote control on up, is like somehow is derived from fossil fuels, from oil. So does anybody tell these people that? In other words, they don't understand. They go, oh, we're going to switch to green energy, electricity, electric cars. Yeah, okay, great. I'm all for it. Like I said, I told Obama and I told Trump, but both ignored me. I told them years ago. I said, you ought to turn the whole fleet of the postal vehicles, delivery vehicles, into electric, because they're like Jeep-like. They're small. They could easily be electric. And I said, you ought to put solar panels on all the roofs of all the post offices. I said, you could cut the price of postage down. The post office, if you're going to give rebates out to, these people who are just going to abuse the system for solar, why don't you just do it internally within the government and all the government buildings and whatnot? But you don't see them doing that because they're hypocrites. That's what I'm trying to tell you constantly. It's hypocrisy for profit, right? They pretend that they've got these like high moral standards, but they don't, physician heal thyself. They just don't apply them to themselves. It's pretty ridiculous, So electricity comes from fossil fuel. Electricity comes primarily from natural gas in the U.S., all right? And, I've seen charts, Department of Energy loves to put out like pie charts and different things. And they like to say, oh, well, so much comes from, these hydroelectric dams and this, that, the other and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just bullshit. In a certain area, if you're near that, and they openly admit solar and wind is very little contribution. And there are only so many places, you know it yourself. You've driven around, right? There's like it filled up practically every space they can. So what are they going to do now? Chop down more trees and forests to put in solar panels? I mean, these people call themselves green. Wouldn't it be better to have a tree breathing in CO2, giving off oxygen, and a place for birds to nest, right? And nature and the beauty of nature for us to experience and look at, than to chop down a forest and put up these windmills that cost probably more to forge the steel, and the plastics come from fossil fuels to begin with, oil to begin with. Then they go up and they have a life expectancy of 10 or 20 years tops, right? And no one wants to fix them and repair them, because the only way to repair them would be with, this heavy equipment that would require massive amounts of fossil fuels. You see, you don't run large cranes, and large bulldozers and major tractor trailers that can haul. Do you ever see the size of a propeller? These things can't even make a turn in when they try to transport these things. They're like these double, road trains. I remember when I was in Australia, they used to have they called them road trains. And it would be like three 18-wheelers, together. Here, sometimes you see two. But in Australia, sometimes you'd see three of them, maybe even four. But I think I've at least seen three, because I was out in the outback a couple of times. And along some of those roads, they're transporting this stuff. And you see this thing. They used to call them road trains, right? Imagine that. A nice big long 18-wheeler, with a container, the things they have on those container ships. And imagine three of those back to back. Road train. Well, anyway, even those double ones, you're not, Elon Musk's Tesla company isn't going to create battery powers to pull that kind of stuff. They've created trucks, but those things are they're not going to carry propellers. heavy steel girders to fix the thousands of bridges that are in disrepair. Do you understand? So there's this fantasy going on in the media. There's this fantasy going on in government, and people are just like, oh, okay, yeah, it would be nice. And I'm like, yeah, I'm all for it. I've driven in an electric car, and I've driven in in the early days, I was one of the first guys who drove in a Prius, and I vlogged about that back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, I guess it was, whenever those things came out. Late 90s, I forget when it was. No, one or the other, but it was either very early 2000s at the latest. And and I gave it the whole review back then, and I gave it a glowing review because it was cool, the hybrid vehicle, because it really didn't use hardly any gas at all, because it had that weird system of where it got better mileage in the city when you were braking a lot, because it was like getting its energy from the braking somehow and stuff. Pretty interesting technology, And the pure electric car, I'm all for it, And like I say, I've got solar panel on the back of my greenhouse thing in the backyard. I'm all for that. I'm not against anything of that kind. I mean, who wouldn't want free energy and, knowing the grid is in such bad shape? Of course. But you have to be realistic when you have to understand that energy, electricity, has to be generated. I have friends who are like real pro nuclear power, and countries like France, have gone, get their energy from nuclear, most of it. And nuclear today is a lot safer than nuclear plants that were built, 50 years ago or whatever. But, it takes time to build those plants. And there's modern technology, and you could do it quicker and this, that, the other. But there's no move. You don't hear these people talking about nuclear energy. You just hear them complaining about oil. It's like all they want to do is put sticks in hornets' nests. Right? Remember, this Russian issue in Ukraine, which I hate to keep harping on, first came to the fore back in 2014 under the Obama administration. And there was a problem before that. But I mean, it came to the fore to such a point that Obama actually appointed Biden to be the point guy to solve the Ukrainian problem. And Biden didn't do it. And I said this yesterday. Instead, he took his son over there, and his son got a board seat on a corrupt oil company. And then Biden held $1 billion over top of the president and said, if you don't fire that guy who's trying to prosecute the company my son works for, you're not getting his $1 billion. You could see that video, and then he laughed about it afterward. He goes, and, sure enough, and he goes, son of a bitch, You've seen that video. Son of a bitch. They within an hour they fired that guy. But nothing about the 13,000 people, separatists, and on the eastern side of Ukraine, the Russians that were killed since then over the past 8 years or so. Or NATO breaking its promise on building up and putting missiles on the border. And that was his complaint, and that's his only two main demands. His idea was to come up with a diplomatic solution for the Russians on the eastern part of Ukraine, and that stop NATO expansion. Like, why are you doing this? Putting missiles all along the border. Okay? It's not comfortable. Like I say, think of your own backyard. What if the neighbor on one side of your yard? What if the neighbor on one side of your yard suddenly put up all these crossbows and weird weapons and strange things all pointing at your swimming pool or your lawn. You'd be like, what the? You know? I had a problem with so I have a doctor's office on one side, which is no big deal, and there's a space in between where nurses park their cars and stuff. I don't care. And they're only there like 3 days a week. So it's like it's the best neighbor you can have. And it's also my doctor, so when I have to go for an appointment, I just walk next door. But on the other side of me, there's a woman who's like she's out of her mind. She's batty. And it's beyond mental. I guess it's mental illness, but I mean, she's sick. She's sick, like evil sick, like evil though. There's a question where you talk about one. There's madness, mental illness, right, which needs to be treated and not taken lightly or whatever. But then there's people who are just down like rotten and evil. Right, that you could say, well, they're mentally ill. Yeah, kind of. But that's the same with warring people, too. You could say, well, everybody who does commit some kind of act. But there's a difference between, a Manson, and somebody who's just lost their, somebody who's crazy, who's seeing weird things and does something. Okay? So I didn't put up barbed wire and, crossbows facing this woman's thing. But what I did do is I raised the fence level so that there's no eye level, between the two houses. So that so in other words, I don't have to deal with her and she doesn't, in other words. So if she's being triggered by the fact that I'm laying out there in the sun enjoying myself, if that triggers her, plus she's a foul mouth and she's a bigot and a racist, a genuine racist bigot. But every one of her daughters is like, she has like about 4 daughters and they all like are involved in interracial marriages, which is the weirdest thing. But she openly would lean over the fence towards the back of my yard sometimes. And she would complain about this stuff and she would use the N-word and stuff like that. So I put up like I guess about 2.5 feet over top of the area where, I could see her or where she would be saying these kinds of things. And that's that. That's the problem. Problem solved. In other words, out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to see you. I don't want you to see me. And if it bothers you that I'm over here loving life, growing food, and I did good deeds for her for years, but there came a point where it was just too much. Her mouth was so foul. She was so horrible. But anyway, it's a longer story than that too. Anyway, she had a problem with my tree and stuff like that. So, like I say, rather than to have to deal with the issue and hear the nonsense, I basically cut my tree in such a way that it's like, a tree normally grows, outwards. I have it where it just faces my side of the thing. It's going to be interesting to see when it I just did that this winter. It'll be interesting to see when it fills out with leaves what it looks like. It's going to be like this half tree. I mean, I'm sure it'll survive because it's a very hardy tree. I think it's a mulberry tree or something. But I have so many birds that they eat things, before they have a chance. I've seen little berries of some kind that look like looked like mulberries or something. So I don't know if it's the world's biggest mulberry bush or mulberry tree. I don't know. Is there such a thing? Let me just do a quick search. New window. Let's see. Mulberry tree. Is there such a thing? Common is a fast-growing small to medium-sized mulberry tree, which grows to 10 to 20 meters tall. It's generally a short-lived tree with a lifespan comparable to that of humans, although there are some specimens known to be more than 250 years old. Okay. So I have never seen, I would have shown you that, but you've already just heard it. Lifespan of humans, that tree's only been there for, since I've been here. So can't be more. I think I've only been here 6 or 7 years. I'd have to look at my deed. I forget. Time just flies. And I had that whole year where I was having the cancer surgery and the kidney stuff. And it's like kind of just put my brain through a blender and kind of just time warped me, So now it's
the future. He came from the future.
But be that as it may, it's probably a mulberry tree, but the birds, they get at it once the first signs of the little tiny things. I think the same has happened with my grape tree. Last year, it looked like I had these tiny little things, like they were baby little grape collections. And then they vanished. So and I even put bird netting over top of them, thinking, okay, but you're birds, And so I guess they got at them. So I don't know if I'm going to get grapes. Now the blackberry bush, I did get blackberries, picked blackberries, ate blackberries, brought some in, put them in my cereal. They were fine. But when I went back for more, they were gone. And the sad part about it is I feed these birds, and it costs me I really can't afford to feed the birds, to be honest with you. In fact, today I have to, after the show, well, the store doesn't open till 7. It's 5:52 a.m. on this Thursday, March 10th, 2022, in case you're wondering. And I'm in the mid-Atlantic states, and the weather outside right now, let's look at the forecast as it changes on my weather app. It's 27 degrees outside. It never fails that whenever I decide to take a walk, it's always below freezing, right? When I showed you that it was yesterday, it was like snowing, a couple inches of snow. But anyway, and we're supposed to get a lot of snow this Saturday. But in any event, no snow today, partly sunny, but yeah, it's 27 degrees out there, mid-Atlantic states, which means, most parts of the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast will be colder, and probably as you head down south, you could expect, we're a week and, I don't know, what are we about? 10 days away from spring or something like that. I don't know. Close to it. The first day of spring, but that's meaningless. So March comes in like a lion and kind of stays like a lion nowadays. April showers, well, I did notice that in the long-term forecast, there's like a week of rain. Oh, and by the way, this is the thing.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Regular viewers or listeners of this show know I have an ongoing problem with my roof leaking. I found a shingle yesterday that was this big when I was shoveling out front, that had blown because we had heavy winds the other night, and it was intact, which means that's got to be a new leak. And I told you about, I showed all that area I tarred and stuff, which I have since taken down. I know I don't have that up anymore. I don't want to look at it. Yesterday, there was a dripping in my bedroom when it rained, as the snow was not melting, but it rained over top of the snow. And so I went up above the spot where my bedroom is. Now, remember, I have a collection thing to keep it from dealing with my bed, right? And it goes to this thing. It's like a Rube Goldberg type of concept, so that the water will go into this thing. And I'm sitting there, and there's water coming down. So I go up into the attic above that spot, And I have towels and stuff underneath these collection bins because I want to, actually for the sake of finding, and I'm putting my fingers in between and under, trying to feel any dampness because there was water pooling there at one point. And like I say, I just slapped on all this tar and stuff, and I spent so much money. And I'm going, well, where's this water coming from? And all I could see is a week's worth of rain. Like, where's it coming from? I literally took everything apart a couple of weeks ago. I got, bathtub and tile caulking, right? Waterproof caulking, right? Which in 72 hours, and it had a full 72 hours to it dries in 24 hours. You could paint it in less than that. 48 hours, it's hardened. I mean, it hardens right away. Hardens fairly quickly. Hardens in 2 hours, actually. But 24 hours, you could wait to paint it. 48 hours, whatever. But they say 72 hours before you, expose it to, tub and tile shower. A shower coming down, onto this caulking. It can withstand a shower. So I caulked all around the bottom. Then I got the liquid rubber in a can, sprayed around all these other areas. And then I got this tape, which is for the liquid rubber tape, and that stuff is tacky as a mother. And I had that against leading into these collection bins. And then I sprayed some of that liquid rubber over the top area so no water could get behind it or something like that. Anyway, so yesterday I noticed there was no water in my collection bin, but there was water leaking. So I'm going where is the water coming from? And hell if I'm going to have to take that whole thing apart again. But I don't know what to do. I'm totally befuddled. There was no dampness. So there's water getting under something, but I don't know what it's getting under because under is dry because I put these towels that I got at the Dollar Tree, these cheap little white towels. And I placed them under things so with the distinct idea that, that they would absorb some water, right? Not that would matter, but I could at least wring them out into the bucket, and whatever. Prevent it from getting crazy. But B, and actually not actually A, that is the A, is primarily to see where the water, if they got damp, to try to, figure out what part of this area, small area, it's not a big area, where this water's coming from. There was no sign of it. I had, my flashlight, looking closely, I put on the reading glasses. Like I say, I don't normally wear glasses except when I'm dealing with all these small little tiny things that I have to deal with,
Okay.
So yeah, that happened. And it's there's going to, we're heading to rainy season. This would be considered the monsoon season in the mid-Atlantic states, right? Coming up in the next week or two, and it's going to last through, for a month and a half. Well, it rains a lot, which is good for the garden, But, what am I going to do? See, in the wintertime, it doesn't matter. I've mentioned this before because the heat keeps the humidity down below 30%. And when you have humidity below 30-some%, even 35%, you don't get the growth of mold or any mildew or any of that kind of thing. It doesn't live or whatever, below that low. And so That's fine. Water leaks in the wintertime. It goes into this, my Rube Goldberg setup, and it goes into the bucket. I dump the bucket down the sink, basically the toilet, and put the bucket back in its spot. And if it rains again, so what? I put a old sock in the bottom so I don't hear the splashing of the drip, 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 so that it absorbs it in that. I mean, I got it all down to a science, because I've been dealing with this. And the heat comes on because it's wintertime, and heat rises to the ceiling and dries everything out, bone dry. Right? And the humidity, I literally have a time temperature humidity thing in my bedroom. And, last night it was while it was raining and snowing, it was 33, but then it went down to like 29 or 20, it was below 30 because the heat came on and it just heated up the room and dried everything out, and the humidity went way down. So no fear of mold, mildew, any of those scary things, black mold or whatever. But that's going to change once the weather gets warmer and the heat no longer comes on. So the humidity is going to shoot up to like 40%, 50. On a rainy day, the humidity could get, high 50, 60, I mean, you close your windows to try to keep it. And I do have a dehumidifier, but that thing has been like spotty on performance lately. But that still doesn't do it. That'll help the air, but, it's not going to dry up the ceiling the way a heated house does. So I have to solve this problem, but I have no frickin' idea. So that's what I'm saying. Strange things are happening. So just to kind of wrap this whole show, put everything together, that goes from, this idea of the cats and dogs are dying young, right? Look at the body of it. The interesting, it's an intern. That's what my cat looks like inside. It's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of weird. Almost looks like a fish at the top part there, right? I think the back is the intestines. I mean, that's and that's a leg joint that is like shooting up there towards the back, I guess. The hind legs. But it's not just the cats and dogs that are dying young. It's humans now. We've lost 2 years off our life expectancy. And like I said, 40,000 of us are dying every week of things that are treatable, preventable or curable. And not to mention the crime, murders, 2,000 murders a week. And people are all obsessed with sending money over. I feel for the people over there. But like I say, at the same time, 8 years ago, this problem could have been solved diplomatically. And right now on the table, there's a diplomatic solution. But the president of this country and the people and the war profiteers don't want it. And the media are pushing jingoism. And these senators and congressmen somehow have this idea. And I guess they're right. People are war crazed, war hungry. Go get those Roshkis, right? But like I said, I don't care if you got a neighbor who's out of their frickin' mind, avoid them. Don't provoke them, right? This neighbor had a problem with my tree. Guess what? I'm going to chop that side of the tree down. This neighbor's got it drives her crazy that I'm happy and getting a suntan, and she wants to lean over and complain about her problem, with people of color or something like that. Hey, I'm putting a fence up, because I'm not going to I don't want to argue with somebody. All right. I don't want to fight with somebody. Right. I want confrontation. See, that's why I have these shirts and these hats and this stuff. You don't know what you don't know. Everything you know is wrong. Game over. Then what? Right. In other words, wearables. Right? Non-confrontational. Let someone just look at that and maybe it might subconsciously hit them in their head. that maybe everything, everything is wrong is an exaggeration. But, with each passing day, I'm starting to wonder, It's almost like everything is wrong. So yeah, putting this all together, this idea, being triggered is a mental illness. And if there's a psychiatrist out there or somebody who has some PhD in psychology or whatever, or a psychology professor somewhere who disagrees with that statement, you need to see a psychiatrist. You need therapy, right? Therapy. Because being triggered is a mental problem, is a mental illness. And being triggered by a word, a statue, or even a flag is a mental illness. All right? Grow up, right? Get some thick skin. And going to war and this idea, look, so we're going to send more weapons and jets over there and hey, those soldiers on the Russian side, they didn't do anything. They're just, do you think they want to be there? No, they don't want to be there. Do you think those Russian separatists, the 13,000 that died or the people involved in that, do you think, they're just like war for war's sake? Like the way they used to try to, remember in the old days, because it's the British, like they used to try to make people look like they were like the Apaches, like they were wild Indians. You know what I'm talking about? Right? That's the ultimate bigotry, this whole idea. And they're doing the same now. They're doing it like everybody white supremacy or something like that. Like as if all these people are out to get somebody. And it went 99.9% for sure of the people in this country are not. Like I said, I've said this many a time. I've yet to even see somebody like that and I've traveled this country like most of the states, and I've been around the world a couple of times. So I don't know who the hell they're talking about. And I lived in D.C., in Philly, in New York, in L.A., down in the Gulf Coast of Florida, in college towns, right? Industrial towns. I've really traveled. I've really lived. I come from the coal region. I was originally born, and I even went back there and lived there for a few more years in between my travels. So, this whole media divisiveness, this craziness, this triggering, and now you get, and this triggering, and what does it do? It leads to war, and now people are sending money and, to support a war. They should, no, conditional. Hey, I'll give you some money. Here's the deal. I'll give money for diplomacy. We know the cards are on the table. NATO, chill out. I mean, let's just put it the way it is. This isn't a monetized show. That thing behind me isn't real. All right? NATO, chill the fuck out and move back your fucking missiles. Russia's not attacking fucking Europe. If anything, Putin's paranoid. Okay? But you don't take a paranoid person, and you don't stick them with the stick, right? And put a missile next to them, right? If somebody's paranoid, you don't start following them around in a trench coat, right? Or standing out in front of their apartment looking up at their window at night when the person's paranoid. I mean, that's torment. And that's in effect what NATO's doing. They tormented this guy. Right? For 8 years, he's been trying to say, look, he's basically expressed his paranoia about NATO. Literally. Okay? This doesn't justify it. Don't go thinking I'm not justifying his actions, right? Just like I wouldn't justify the action of some paranoid person doing something, But the point is, at the same token, you don't take somebody who says, hey, I'm paranoid because you got all these missiles pointed at me. could you please push them back? And I don't want them in Ukraine because Ukraine juts right into my, faces three sides of my country. You see? And the eastern part that is that like three-side facing area are people that want to be part of Russia. They're separatists. And you've killed basically 13,000 of them since then. And so his deal is simple. Let the separatists separate and give me assurance that NATO isn't, Ukraine's not going to line up more missiles in Ukraine. And the Ukrainian president basically yesterday or the day before agreed to that. So peace is on the table. It's already laid out. Both sides have it. Okay? But instead, there's still people dying on both sides. Now, why? Because the president of the United States and the war-profiteers and NATO won't sit down with the Russians and the Ukrainians and just have at a table and have them sign those papers, pass them back across each other, sign it again, and declare ceasefire, peace. And instead of us sending money for weapons over there, we'll send money to rebuild the damage is done. Okay? Let the American people's generosity be given to rebuild those apartment buildings and, unfortunately, those hospitals or whatever else was destroyed. We don't, whatever they're showing us. Peace. Peaceful solution, rebuild. Okay? And then let's rebuild America, too, and our infrastructure, which is falling apart, and let's stop the 40,000 people dying here. Because more people die here in 1 week than have died in the Gulf Wars. On the American side, we're talking 40,000 people a week dying of diseases that could be treated, cured, prevented. Look at the sky up there. Look at the sky in the camera 2 view. Isn't that wild? The sun's coming up. In another week, it'll be actually at 6:12 a.m. We're going to be spring ahead, so it'll be considered. It would be 7 o'clock now. So if it were 6, this time would still be dark. Actually, it's just going to be lighter at night, which is kind of weird. That's why I think they ought to get rid of that thing. That's some neat colorization. I hope you can see that. Anyway, this show's gone on. Yes, there's peaceful solution. Triggering is a mental disease, and they're doing something that's killing our pets and killing us. And let's face the facts. And they don't care. And we're dying in America on, at 40,000 people, 40,000 a week. All right. And where 2,000 of us are being murdered every week here in this country. And our government doesn't care. And people think electricity comes from like it's just electricity. They don't know. And they think that all the things we have, plastics and stuff, don't come from oil. So they want to get rid of oil. So what do they want us to be? Live. What, live where? How? Fix everything. I mean, everything, do you understand? Okay? So there's an insanity that has broken loose, mass insanity. It's affected the entire government, media, and the billionaires and all the zombies who are just watching TV and watching YouTube, right? These pundits on YouTube who just keep talking about it and analyzing and reanalyzing something that's simple. The solution is simple. This is a carbon-based planet. We're a carbon-based life form. We need it. We have to do it. We need heat in the wintertime. We have plastics. We have all these other things. We need to forge steel to fix bridges. Okay? You can't even build a windmill without fossil fuels. Okay? Stop being triggered. That's mentally ill people are triggered. Grow up. Get a thick skin. That's like people who are afraid of clowns. Okay? Oh, that statue's triggering me. That clown is triggering me. You got a problem. You got a problem. And you need to see a psychiatrist. All right? So, we need more psychiatrists in this country. Anyway, I don't know.
Good morning.
You think about it. And, help support this broadcast. Go to my site, ROCKFLUX.com. It's no great website in terms of a website, but what it is a collection of links to all the things I do. I've written over 50 beat poetry songs, and I think half of them are pretty damn good. Check them out. You'll like some. You might not like the other ones. Great solar stuff isn't just solar stuff. You can get stuff there that'll help you if as this power grid falls apart. And like the girls wearing the game over thing and the hat there, you get hats, hoodies, bags, stickers, all kinds of stuff with all my slogans on them. Check it out. There's links on the ROCKFLUX.com website. And my books, get them in print. They're available on Amazon and other places, but get the print. My latest book, Then What, is only like $9.95. Anyway, please support the site. That lets me know. Spread the word, and I'll probably talk to you tomorrow, hopefully. Cheers.